Every week, somebody drags a pair of 40-year-old speakers into my shop and sets them on the bench and asks me the same question. Are these any good? And 9 times out of 10, what they're really asking is, did I get ripped off? So today, I'm ranking 7 vintage speaker brands from worst value to best, based on what I actually find when I pull the drivers, check the crossovers, and put a meter on them. Not marketing, not nostalgia, what's inside the box. If you're new here, I'm Gary. I've been fixing this stuff since before some of you were born, and if that sounds like your kind of Saturday afternoon, stick around and maybe hit subscribe. No pressure, just good to have you in the shop. Let's get into it. Number 7. Number 7, Cerwin-Vega. Cerwin-Vega built its whole identity on one word, loud. And to be fair, they earned it. The D series from the 70s, especially the D9, put a 15-inch woofer in a cabinet the size of a nightstand and gave it sensitivity ratings that made a modest receiver sound like a stadium rig. I've had guys bring these in just to show off how far the needle swings on my SPL meter, and honestly, the woofers can take it. Cerwin-Vega used heavy-gauge voice coil wire and generous magnet structures because the whole design brief was survive a party. Here's the problem I run into every time one of these hits my bench. The crossovers are simple first-order networks in most models, which keeps costs down but does nothing to smooth out a mid-range that's already recessed on paper. You get a scooped frequency response, big bottom end, a dip right where vocals live, and a horn tweeter that can turn harsh once you push past a moderate volume. That's not a subjective complaint, that's what shows up on a sweep. Then there's the foam. Almost every D-series woofer from this era used foam surins that have turned to dust by now. I quote $60 to $90 per driver for a proper refoam, and most of these cabinets run 2 or 3 drivers each. So you're looking at $200 to $500 in restoration on top of a price point that's already climbed to $800 for a clean pair, mostly on nostalgia from the bass head crowd. I'll say this plainly. Cerwin-Vega speakers do one job well. They get loud without falling apart. But a one-trick speaker isn't worth top-shelf money, and that's why they land at the bottom of this list.
Number 6, Pioneer. Pioneer is a strange case because most collectors only think of them for receivers. The Silverface SX series gets all the attention, and they completely skip the speakers. That's a mistake on some models and completely fair on others, and figuring out which is really the whole game with this brand. The 1975 CS99A is the one worth chasing. It's a genuine 3-way floor stander, 15-inch woofer, horn-loaded mid-range compression driver, and a ribbon T-later built to go head-to-head with JBL and Klipschy in the showroom. I've had a pair of these on the bench, and the build quality inside surprised me. Proper crossover components, not the bargain bin stuff Pioneer used in its budget lines. The 1976 HPM 100 is the other standout, running that same ribbon T-later technology and a frequency response that's flatter than a lot of speakers selling for double the money today. But for every CS99A or HPM 100, there are 10 Pioneer cabinets that were built to ship alongside a receiver as a package deal, not to stand on their own. The S-Series bookshelf models in particular use thinner driver baskets, cheaper crossover caps that drift out of spec over time, and cabinets with less internal bracing. You can see the handles flex if you press on them, which tells you something about resonance control right there. A clean pair of HPM 100s runs $200 to $400. A CS99A goes for $300 to $500. Both punch well above that price. But grab the wrong Pioneer model off a listing, and you've got a $200 speaker doing a $50 job. Know the model number before you buy. That's the whole lesson with this brand. Number 5, Infinity. Infinity is the brand that makes me genuinely excited to open a cabinet because you never quite know what you're going to find. Arnie Nudell started the company in 1968 and immediately started experimenting. Electromagnetic planar drivers, the EMIT T-later, servo-controlled subwoofers, and the flagship reference standard system. This was a company chasing technology most competitors wouldn't touch for another 20 years. The EMIT T-later is the piece I always point out to people. It's a planar design using a thin conductive diaphragm instead of a dome, and on the bench it measures extended and remarkably linear well past 20 kHz. On a well-preserved pair of Kappa 9s, that top end has a clarity that a lot of cone and dome speakers from the same era simply can't touch. These sell for $800 to $1,500, and in good condition, they earn every dollar of it. Here's the catch, and it's a real one. Infinity's lineup was wide, and the budget end of it does not share the same DNA. A pair of reference 3s from the entry-level line sells for $100 to $200 and sounds thin and hollow next to their bigger siblings. Smaller magnets, simpler crossovers, none of that emit technology trickling down. I've also seen more capacitor drift and cold solder joints in Infinity crossovers than almost any other brand on this list, likely due to some cost-cutting and component grade in certain production runs. It's worth a scope check before you trust a pair at full volume. Infinity doesn't have a reliable floor the way some of the other brands here do. Buy the right model and it's one of the best deals in vintage audio. Buy blind and you're gambling on a coin flip.
Number 4, KLH. KLH was Henry Kloss's first company after he left Acoustic Research in 1957, working alongside Malcolm Lowe and Joseph Anton Hoffman with one clear goal: bring genuinely accurate sound down to a price a working family could afford. The 1967 KLH Model 5 is the one people talk about, and rightly so. A 10-inch acoustic suspension woofer paired with a direct radiating tweeter in a sealed compact cabinet, and it produces bass depth that seems almost impossible for its size once you understand how acoustic suspension actually works, using the trapped air inside a sealed enclosure as a spring to control the woofer's motion, rather than relying on a large ported box. That's the sound people call East Coast sound. Warm, smooth through the mid-range, controlled low end that never gets boomy, sitting in direct contrast to the punchier, more forward West Coast sound you'll hear from brands like JBL later on this list. KLH wasn't trying to impress you with volume, they were trying to get the reproduction right. On the bench, KLH holds up well structurally. They used standard driver frame sizes, which means refoam kits and replacement parts are easy to source even now. And I don't see nearly the crossover cap failure rate I see here that I see in some other brands, probably down to a simpler, more conservative network design with fewer failure points. A clean pair of Model 5s runs $200 to $400. The smaller Model 6 and Model 17 bookshelf units go for $75 to $150. The reason KLH sits at 4 instead of higher is simply range. This was a narrow catalog. There's no big floor-standing KLH built to compete with the JBLs or ARs of the world. What they built well. There just isn't much of it to choose from.
Number 3, Advent. Henry Kloss left KLH in 1967 and started Advent with a very specific mission: build something that sounds as good as the best speakers on the market and sell it for half the price. The 1969 large Advent delivered on that promise almost embarrassingly well. 10-inch acoustic suspension woofer, 1-inch dome tweeter, a simple two-way crossover in a plain walnut veneer cabinet with no exotic parts anywhere inside it. That simplicity is the whole point. Kloss believed in getting the fundamentals right rather than chasing complexity for its own sake. And when I put one of these on the scope, the response is remarkably even for a speaker this affordable. The large Advent was the first speaker under $200 to earn a serious recommendation from the major audio publications of the day, and it sold in huge numbers through the 70s, which actually works in your favor now. Clean pairs are still genuinely easy to find, unlike some of the rarer brands on this list where a good example takes months to track down. A clean pair today runs $150 to $300. The smaller Advents go for $75 to $150. Refoaming the woofer is a straightforward job, $30 to $50 per driver, maybe 45 minutes of work if you've done a few before. Bass extends respectably into the low 40s, the mid-range stays natural without any obvious coloration, and the tweeter doesn't get harsh even when you push it. I tell people all the time, dollar for dollar, nothing on this list gives you more accurate sound per dollar spent than a clean pair of large Advents. It's not the rarest speaker, it's not the flashiest, it's just correctly engineered, and that's worth more than people give it credit for.
Number 2, Acoustic Research. If Advent proved you could build an affordable speaker that sounded right, it's because AR invented the technology that made it possible in the first place. Edgar Wiltshire and Henry Kloss founded Acoustic Research in 1954, and Wiltshire is the man who patented acoustic suspension, the idea of sealing the cabinet and letting the trapped air do the work a much larger ported box would normally do. That single patent reshaped what a home speaker could be, and every brand on this list that uses a sealed enclosure owes something to that design. The 1967 AR-3A is the model I'd point serious collectors towards. 12-inch acoustic suspension woofer, a dome mid-range, a dome tweeter, all packed into a sealed cabinet barely 2 cubic feet. I've measured these on the bench more times than I can count, and the response stays neutral and balanced in a way that genuinely holds its own against speakers built decades later. The crossover networks in the AR-3A use higher quality components than a lot of what I see from this era, and the drivers are well matched to each other. You don't get one section of the frequency range fighting another. A clean pair of AR-3As sells for $300 to $600 right now. The smaller two-way AR-2AX runs $100 to $200. Parts are widely available. There's a genuinely active restoration community around this brand, which matters more than people realize when you're hunting for a specific gasket or a replacement dome. AR sits at number 2 because the engineering here isn't just good, it's foundational. The sound has held up, and the prices simply haven't caught up to how important this brand actually was.
Number 1, JBL. JBL tops this list because no other brand here gives you this full a package. Sound quality, model range, parts availability, and resale value all landing in the same place. James Bullough Lansing had already founded Altec Lansing before starting JBL in 1946, and he built the company on Pro Audio studio monitor technology that eventually made its way down into home speakers. That Pro Audio pedigree matters on the bench. These drivers were engineered to handle real, sustained power, not just survive a spec sheet test. The 1970 L100 became the best-selling loudspeaker in American hi-fi history. And once you've opened a few, it's not hard to see why. 12-inch woofer, 5-inch mid-range, 1.5-inch dome tweeter, behind that instantly recognizable orange foam grille. The sound is forward and dynamic. Vocals and guitars sit right up front in the mix. That's West Coast sound at its most confident, and it's a different philosophy entirely from the more restrained KLH and AR designs earlier on this list. Neither approach is objectively correct. It comes down to what you want out of your system, and I'd encourage anyone shopping this list to actually listen to both styles before deciding which one they are. Beyond the L100, JBL's range is really what sets them apart. L36, L50, and L112 are all solid 2- and 3-way designs running $150 to $400 a pair. The L100 itself goes for $400 to $800 depending on condition and which series you land on. Series 1, 2, or 3, each with slightly different driver and crossover specs, so check before you buy. What really makes JBL a smart purchase from a bench chair is parts support. Replacement diaphragms, crossover capacitors, and foam surround kits are all still being manufactured, which makes a JBL restoration one of the more straightforward jobs that comes across my bench. I've also watched these hold resale value better than anything else on this list. Buy a decent pair, enjoy them for years, and if you ever need to sell, you're not walking away with pennies on the dollar. No single spec makes JBL number 1. It's that there isn't a weak link anywhere in the chain. Sound, parts, resale, availability. That combination is rare, and it's why they earn the top spot. That's 7 vintage speaker brands ranked, from worst value to best, based on what actually shows up when you open the cabinet and put a meter on it. A few of these brands make genuinely excellent speakers. Cerwin-Vega, Clips, brands not even on this list. They just don't make good deals right now, and that's a different thing entirely from making bad gear. I'll leave you with the same advice I give everybody who walks into my shop with a pair under their arm. Before you hand over any money for a 50-year-old speaker, pull the grill and look at the surrounds. Cracked foam or hardened rubber tells you the real price of that great deal before you've even heard it play. Every piece of gear this old has its own history, its own hours of use, its own storage conditions, its own hands that worked on it before yours. No two pairs ever look quite the same, and no ranking can tell you exactly what's inside the specific cabinet sitting in front of you. So here's what I'll leave you with. Next time you're standing over a dusty pair of speakers at an estate sale, ask yourself,
What's this cabinet actually telling me, and am I willing to open it up and find out for myself? That's it for me today. I'll see you at the next bench.